My name is Samantha, and I work from home part-time. My husband, Frank, is 35 years old and works for a company. His parents live about an hour away. I don't get along well with them, especially my mother-in-law. I didn't go to high school, and my mother-in-law wasn't happy about that. She didn't want me to marry Frank, but he insisted. "If you don't accept our marriage, I'll cut ties with you," he told his parents. Since she loves her son, she finally agreed. Now we keep our distance from his parents, but when we do meet, they make rude comments. How can someone who didn't finish high school be my son's wife? She works from home? That's just because she couldn't get a proper job. She's probably trying to take advantage of Frank and take our family's money. I always answer calmly, "I'm not trying to cause trouble for your family, so please don't worry." I never told them what I actually do for work because I knew they wouldn't listen. One day, Frank suggested I explain it to them. "I think Mom will understand if you explain your job properly," he said. But I told him she might just use that information against me. Frank reassured me, "If this causes too much stress, just let me know." In the end, we decided not to tell them about my work. Instead, I acted like a clueless wife whenever we visited. For example, when my mother-in-law said, "A good daughter-in-law helps in the kitchen during family gatherings," I would reply, "Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry if I upset you." I pretended to apologize but never did what she wanted. Our relationship stayed distant. My mother-in-law kept calling me ignorant and tried to teach me how to do chores. But no matter what I did, she always found something to criticize. I could have stopped visiting, but if I did, she would keep calling me nonstop. So I went, just to avoid that. But the more I failed, the more excited she got about teaching me. Worse, she started complaining about me to relatives and neighbors. My daughter-in-law is useless. She's lazy and can't do anything right. Because of this, everyone knew that we didn't get along. Whenever my husband was around, he would protect me from difficult relatives, and I also spoke up for myself. "I'm doing my best too," I said. "I didn't finish high school because of certain circumstances, but my parents gave me a good education at home. They taught me that interfering in other people's families is rude." The relative didn't expect me to talk back and got angry. "Instead of appreciating advice, you're being sarcastic?" They left with a trembling face. Frank and I were surprised by what happened and tried to forget about it. But later, my mother-in-law heard about it and scolded me. "I always thought you were unreasonable, but this is too much. I'll be reporting this to your parents." I replied calmly, "Are you planning to complain about my parents now too? They believe in handling their own matters, so they'll probably just laugh it off." She looked like she wanted to argue, but Frank stepped in. "Right now, Samantha is the one keeping us connected. She's even asking me not to cut ties with you. I'm staying quiet about your behavior for her sake." Hearing that, my mother-in-law glared at me before leaving the room. After that, we kept contact with them to a minimum. 2 years later, one day, my father-in-law called. He said they were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary with a trip to Paris and invited us to join. "It's not good to stay distant like this," he said. "I want to fix things between your mother and Samantha. I also want to apologize. Please come with us." Frank and I were suspicious, but we also realized we hadn't handled things perfectly either. Frank wasn't convinced, but I thought, if this trip really helps us get along, it's worth trying. "Let's give it a chance," I told him. "If anything goes wrong, we can cut ties after that." In the end, we decided to go. The trip begins. We met at the airport, and surprisingly, my in-laws were polite. "I'm so glad you came," my mother-in-law said. "I'm sorry for what happened before, Samantha." I felt relieved. Maybe this trip will go well. While we waited for our flight, my mother-in-law started talking. "I've been taking a French class. My teacher is from Paris, and he always compliments me. I can't wait to use my French. How about you, Samantha? Can you speak French?" "A little bit," I said. "Oh, really? Well, if you need help, just ask me." Her tone felt a little sarcastic, but I brushed it off with a smile. After a long flight, we arrived in Paris. Right away, my mother-in-law wanted to test me. "Samantha, ask that airport worker where the baggage claim is. Let's see how good your French really is," she said with a smug smile. I sighed. "I can, but pointing at someone like that is a bit rude. It could cause trouble, you know." Then I spoke to the staff, found out where our luggage was, and led my in-laws there. For a moment, my mother-in-law's face went pale when she heard my French, but she quickly laughed. Oh, the staff must be nice to tourists. I guess even clumsy French works. Should we rely on you for the rest of the trip? I raised an eyebrow. What? I came to Paris to enjoy myself, not to be your personal guide. Frank and I were shocked at their attitude, but before we could say more, an airport worker called my mother-in-law over. She couldn't understand a word of the fast French and started to panic. I could have ignored it, but I stepped in to help. The staff offered us a guide, but we had to be careful. Some guides charge tourists a lot in hidden fees. When I refused the guide's offer and explained why, my in-laws got angry. We know what we're doing. Stop acting like you're better than us. Yeah, you barely speak French yourself, so stay out of it. I didn't argue. Instead, I made a decision. All right, we don't want to cause trouble. Let's go our separate ways. Frank and I want to shop, so we'll head to the hotel ourselves. Yeah, let's go, Frank agreed. There's no point staying with them if they act like this. Frank was angrier than I was. He grabbed my hand, and we left. I felt a little worried about leaving them alone in a foreign country, but they insisted they could handle themselves. So we focused on enjoying our first day in Paris. That evening, when we arrived at the hotel, we saw a commotion in the lobby. My in-laws were arguing with the hotel staff. It turned out they had tried to cancel our room booking without our permission, but since the room was booked with my card, the hotel refused. My in-laws, unable to understand French, caused a scene. What's going on? I asked. We don't want to stay in the same hotel as shameless people like you. My mother-in-law snapped. Leave at once. Frank and I exchanged looks. Then I smiled. We actually booked this hotel for you as a gift, I said. So if you don't like it, feel free to change hotels yourselves. But I can't, my mother-in-law mumbled, realizing she couldn't communicate in French. Well, in that case, we'll upgrade our room so we won't have to see each other during the trip, I said. I explained to the hotel staff, and they arranged a better room for us. My mother-in-law was frustrated. Why does your French work so well? They don't understand me at all. That's when I finally revealed my secret. I'm sorry for the confusion, I said. You know my father is American, but my mother and grandmother are French, so I grew up speaking French. My grandfather is from Spain, so I also speak Spanish. Oh, and I actually graduated from university. What? But you didn't even go to high school. Do you know what skipping grades means? I didn't attend high school, but I skipped ahead to university. Now, I work from home as a translator and interpreter for French and Spanish. I also self-taught myself Chinese and Japanese. As I finished explaining, the hotel staff told us our room was ready, and we walked away. My mother-in-law started shouting behind us. But I turned back and said, if you make too much noise, security might get involved. If that happens, I won't translate for you. Do you want to be banned from entering the country? That shut them up. When we got to our room, Frank bowed his head. Samantha, I'm really sorry. I had a bad feeling about this trip, but I never expected them to do something so awful. I don't want to deal with them anymore. I'm done. Let's cut ties for real this time. I smiled. No need to apologize. It's your family, so I'll follow your decision. We talked about the future, then spent the rest of our trip enjoying Paris, just the two of us. The last night. On our final night, we went to the hotel restaurant and saw something funny. My mother-in-law was trying to order food, but the waiter kept saying, "Please speak English." The staff was speaking in English, but my mother-in-law ignored him and kept trying to speak broken French. She couldn't pronounce anything correctly, so she never got her order. I felt bad for the staff but couldn't help laughing. I even recorded the moment. Then my father-in-law noticed us and walked over. Can't you see your mother is struggling? Why aren't you helping? I shrugged. I thought she was confident in her French skills. Besides, if I help, she'll just get mad, won't she? Come on, just order for her. I smirked. Well, I do translation as a job. If you want my help, I'll charge a fee. What? You're that greedy? Fine, I'll pay. Just do it quickly. I was surprised he agreed so easily. I translated their order smoothly, but instead of being grateful, my mother-in-law got even angrier. I didn't need your help, my mother-in-law snapped. Oh, your husband begged me to interpret for you. He even had to pay me for it. If you have any complaints, take them up with him, not me, I replied, then returned to my seat. The next morning, as my in-laws boarded the airport bus, the atmosphere was tense. It was clear they had fought after dinner, cutting ties. After returning home, Frank and I visited my in-laws to formally declare our estrangement and to collect payment for the translation service. However, my mother-in-law had anticipated this and invited her French class friends over. As soon as I entered, the ladies frowned at me. My mother-in-law wasted no time playing the victim. She lied about her career to us, her own in-laws, and how shameless, refusing to help us in an emergency unless she got paid. I smiled and pulled out my phone. While we recorded our trip as a memory, so please enjoy, I played a video showing my mother-in-law struggling with her poor French, causing trouble for the restaurant staff, and demanding we separate from them. Her friends watched in stunned silence. Maybe she wasn't ready for French conversations yet, one lady said with an awkward smile. My mother-in-law's face turned bright red as she lowered her head. Frank sighed. Mom, does it feel good to mock Samantha in front of your friends? I'm done with you and Dad. Don't contact us again. Ever. Then he turned to my father-in-law. This is the fee for Samantha's interpretation services. She helped you despite everything, so it's only fair you pay her properly. Bye. Before I could say anything, Frank grabbed my hand and led me out of the house. The final straw, not long after, we received confirmation that the payment had gone through. But instead of leaving us alone, my father-in-law called, demanding I fix things with the family. I only have a middle school education, so I'm not good at negotiating these things, I replied vaguely, then blocked him. I have no idea what happened to them after that. Frank made it clear he wouldn't be involved, and he reassured me I didn't need to worry about it either. In the end, my past experience with people taking advantage of my language skills helped me stand my ground. I used to avoid mentioning my translation work because acquaintances would expect free or underpaid lessons, but this time, it worked to my advantage. Now that we've moved, I'm working comfortably without ridicule or interference. Maybe it's time to learn another language and expand my horizons even more.